welcome back to my YouTube channel. It is me, Steven, your friendly neighborhood anesthesiologist and critical care physician and medical ethicist and podcaster. If you listen to the Black Doctors podcast, thank you so much for listening and supporting. That's cool. Let's see. I am continuing on to kind of document my experiences as a fellow pursuing fellowship in critical care medicine. To that end, these videos aren't going to be super edited. It's not going to be super polished. I'm just going to kind of get in where I fit in and, record when I get the chance. Different months in fellowship will be busier than other months. So, what you see is what you get. Hopefully you get something from this. This is specifically for you who is interested in becoming a physician. You medical student who is interested in specializing in anesthesiology, and if you're considering subspecializing in critical care medicine, this is definitely for you. This is just me sharing my experiences. So let's get to it. This month, let's see, we're just finishing up September, and this is my third month of fellowship, so I am a quarter of the way done. Things are going well. I'm really enjoying the time thus far. The first month was in the neuro ICU. Second month was in the medical ICU, and I just wrapped up in the surgical ICU. For the fellowship, I will complete a total of 3 months in the surgical ICU, and then I'll complete 3 months in the cardiothoracic ICU. That's actually what I start this month, so in October. Our surgical ICU is technically like 16 beds that are on the same floor, but we have overflow to other ICUs. So the census kind of ranged between, I think we got as far down as 16 for the month, but typically it ranged around like 20 patients or so. It was a great experience. Looking forward to going back to it. I really do like surgical intensive care. It's kind of my favorite because it's a natural extension from what I do in the operating room as an anesthesiologist. So for the month, the kind of typical schedule was coming in at 6 o'clock in the morning for sign out. The night team would turn over to the day team, and every day, the schedule's kind of weird, but for the residents, we would have a resident on each day, and usually 2 residents on. There was a urology intern, there was an emergency medicine resident, anesthesia resident, and a general surgery resident. So those were the 4 residents, and then there were nurse practitioners and PAs that work in the unit kind of all the time. So yeah, it was a super awesome experience. Got to do a little bit of teaching because of the way the resident schedule was working. We didn't get a lot of resident teaching because they were kind of like, would do a 24-hour call and then be post-call and then be off. So they were kind of like Q3, and they weren't around as much as, would have liked to have done some longitudinal teaching. But it was incredible to watch the urology intern who started off, and he was just reading the critical care book, and he got progressively better throughout the month. So that was awesome to watch and see how he improved his performance. So we would show up at 6. We would get sign out, talk about the overnight events. The night team would go home minus the fellow. The fellows, we would all go to our trauma turnover with the trauma surgeons, and we would talk about trauma activations and acute needs on the floor or in the ICU with patients in the trauma service. And then we would go back to the ICUs. We'd finish, we'd go to the trauma rounds, then go back to the ICU. Depending on what time the attending wanted to round, we would start rounds. Some attendings, it was kind of awesome because it was a mixed bag of attendings. Some would round with the whole group. Some would round with just the fellows. And then as fellows, we would round with the team. So it was just kind of different. And then depending on how many fellows were there are actually 4 on for the month, which is a lot. But there was, the 3 surgical quick care fellows and then myself. So it was a lot of staff from the fellow level. So we kind of took turns. Some of us were able to take days off. They actually left me, went to a conference for a couple of days, and I held the unit down. But it was good to see the different attendings management styles. It was good to sit back and observe the other fellows and how they approached it and how they ran rounds. So that was really cool to watch, and mostly just to learn the surgical management. Because, as anesthesiologists, as anesthesia residents, you'll do an intern year, and you also would have completed medical school. So you would be familiar with, your 2 months of general surgery, rotation, whatever, right? But I haven't had that since at least 8 or 10 years ago. So it was cool to kind of dig back into some of those surgical issues and chest tube management and drain output and, pancreatitis, all this stuff that I'd kind of forgotten over the course of several years. My surgical counterparts were awesome. They were able to really help, shore up that education and provide a huge piece. So yeah, we would go to report, we would round, and then we just kind of clean up tasks. Depending on the attending, some attendings round until like 1 or 2 in the afternoon. Some would finish by around 11, and it just depended on what we had to do the rest of the day. We would do a journal club every afternoon is what we do for the fellowship at 2 o'clock, where we go over articles or do an M&M. So that's kind of what we do in the afternoon, then go back, run the list, and then go home if you're not on call. So we did that for 4 weeks. Again, I think last week there was a big trauma conference in town. So the surgical fellows were able to all go to the conference. I hung out in the ICU. And yeah, it was a good experience to kind of be the head honcho and run the unit. It's super busy. This ICU, we get a lot of trauma patients. We get a lot of transplants. So we're getting liver transplants. We're getting kidney liver transplants. We're getting pancreas transplants. We get some thoracic surgical patients, some esophagectomies. What else? Then your typical like surgical crit care, your bowel cases, like your sepsis, bowel perforations, and those people that need just kind of more of a short-term stay. So that was how the month went. I learned a ton. It was awesome to just go and be surrounded by so many smart people. Got to work a lot with the residents, who were there and work with them on central line placement and just how to think about patients kind of holistically and from a big picture, what are we trying to achieve for each of these patients? So it was a really good experience. Trying to think of what else started, the job application process, started reaching out to a couple of different programs regarding potential jobs in the future. So looking forward to moving on into the cardiothoracic ICU. That's where I'm going to start, on Monday. So thanks for following along. I'll do my best to keep you updated. And if you have any questions about surgical crit care, anesthesia crit care fellowships, feel free to let me know. I'll answer questions as I have the time. And also, if you haven't already, check out the Black Doctors podcast. A new episode comes out every Monday. So for the month, that was a big thing. Like, how do I manage the podcast as I'm in the ICU? It's a lot of hours. So I was able to record several episodes with the folks at Tour for Diversity in Medicine. They took over the show and they provided outstanding content, different panel discussion formats. On the weekend, I usually have 1 weekend day off. I would be able to edit the podcast episode and get it uploaded. So if you haven't already, check out the Black Doctors podcast. It's available wherever you listen to podcasts, and it just shares the stories of underrepresented minorities in healthcare, tells some of what they overcame. It's got information that's valuable wherever you are in your career. If you're a medical student that just wants to know what it's like to be a neurologist or a plastic surgeon and some of the typical things they come into contact with each day, check it out. There's some really good panels. There's some really good information on like navigating contracts and malpractice insurance. So, it's available on iTunes, Spotify. And then if you're not already following me on Instagram, Stephen Bradley, MD. Hopefully this helps, give you some extra information, and go out there, do some great stuff. Representation matters.